You're about to learn why some women are psychological time bombs that destroy every man who tries to love them. And before you think, that's not my situation, let me tell you something. If you've ever been with a woman who ran hot and cold, who pulled you close then pushed you away, who made you feel like a king one day and worthless the next, you've danced with this demon. And the dance always ends the same way, with you broken, confused and wondering what the hell just happened. See, there's a type of woman out there who's wired differently. Not by choice, but by damage. By patterns carved into her psyche so deep that she doesn't even know they're running her life. She's the avoidant woman, and she's not just difficult to love, she's designed to destroy anyone who tries. But here's where it gets interesting. These women don't look damaged. They're often successful, attractive, seemingly confident. They draw you in with their mystery, their independence, their challenge. You think you found someone special, someone worth fighting for. What you've actually found is a psychological maze with no exit, and you're about to lose yourself trying to find one. I didn't learn this from psychology textbooks or YouTube videos. I learned it the hard way, through years of watching men get systematically dismantled by these women, through my own experiences that left me questioning everything I thought I knew about relationships, and through patterns so consistent, so predictable, that once you see them, you can spot an avoidant woman from across a crowded room. Let me paint you a picture of how this typically unfolds. You meet her, and something feels different. She's not throwing herself at you like other women. She's reserved, mysterious, makes you work for her attention. This activates something primal in you, the hunt, the challenge, the desire to be the one who finally breaks through her walls. The first few dates are electric. She opens up just enough to make you feel special, chosen. Maybe she even shows unexpected vulnerability, tells you things she never tells anyone. You're hooked. Then, out of nowhere, everything shifts. The woman who was texting you good morning suddenly goes silent. The person who looked at you with such intensity now seems distant, distracted. You replay everything in your mind. What did you do wrong? What changed? But here's the truth. Nothing changed. This was always the plan. Not consciously, but programmed into her attachment system like a virus in her emotional operating system. The avoidant woman operates on a paradox that will drive you insane if you don't understand it. She desperately wants love but is terrified of actually receiving it. She pursues connection but sabotages it the moment it becomes real. She chooses strong, confident men precisely because she knows they won't tolerate her behavior long term, confirming her deep belief that love equals abandonment. Here's what's actually happening in her mind, though she'd never admit it. Probably doesn't even consciously know it. When she starts feeling genuine emotions for you, her attachment system interprets this as danger. Getting close means getting hurt. Vulnerability means destruction. Love means loss. So her psyche does what it's programmed to do. It creates distance, but not honest distance. Manufactured drama, artificial problems, fights that come from nowhere and make no sense. I knew one avoidant woman who exemplified this perfectly. Second date, she's writing me poetry, telling me I'm different from every other man she's known. Third date, she manufactures a fight so artificial, so obviously constructed, that I initially thought she was joking. She storms out, and then silence. 6 months of silence. Not because she didn't care, but because she cared too much and her system couldn't handle it. Here's what most men don't understand about avoidant women. They don't choose weak men for relationships. That's what everyone gets wrong. They choose safe men for marriage, men they can control, men who won't trigger their attachment system because there's no real emotional investment. These are the husbands they don't respect, the ones they'll eventually cheat on or leave, not out of cruelty but out of existential boredom. But for passion, for those intense connections they simultaneously crave and fear, they choose strong men, confident men, men who won't chase when they run. And then they test these men relentlessly, pushing them away to see if they'll fight to stay, then pushing harder when they do, creating an impossible situation where staying means losing yourself, and leaving means confirming their deepest fear, that everyone abandons them eventually. The cycles are predictable once you know the pattern. First comes the intimacy phase. She lets you in, shows you her soft side, makes you feel like you're finally seeing the real her. This might last days, weeks, maybe a month or two if you're lucky. Then comes the trigger, usually when things are going perfectly. Maybe you said, "I love you," Maybe you talked about the future. Maybe you just looked at her with too much affection. Whatever it is, it trips her wire. Next comes the distancing phase. She becomes cold, critical, picks fights about nothing. She might accuse you of cheating with zero evidence. She might suddenly need space to figure things out. She might literally disappear, ghost you completely, block you on everything. This isn't manipulation in the traditional sense. She's not trying to control you. She's trying to control her own emotional panic. If you chase during this phase, you're dead. Every text you send, every call you make, every attempt to fix things just confirms to her that you're too invested, too dangerous to her emotional equilibrium. But if you don't chase, if you give her the space she claims to want, she interprets this as abandonment, as proof that you never really cared. You literally cannot win. Then comes the return phase, because yes, they always come back. Could be weeks, could be months, but they come back. Not with apologies or explanations, but acting like nothing happened. Or worse, with some vague statement about needing to figure themselves out that explains nothing. They expect you to just accept this, to pretend the emotional whiplash didn't happen, to reset like nothing occurred. Most men, desperate to have her back, accept these terms. They suppress their confusion, their hurt, their very legitimate need for explanation. They're just grateful she returned. This is the biggest mistake you can make with an avoidant woman, because accepting this behavior without consequence teaches her that she can do it again. And she will. Over and over. Each cycle getting worse, each return meaning less, until you're so emotionally damaged you don't even recognize yourself anymore. I had another experience with an avoidant woman that lasted longer, showed me the full spectrum of their patterns. First few weeks were perfect, too perfect in hindsight. Then came the first test. "You're probably cheating on me," she texted, completely out of nowhere. No evidence, no reason, just pure projection of her own fears. I handled it calmly, reassured her. Thought it was a one-time insecurity. I was wrong. Every 6 to 8 weeks, like clockwork, there was an explosion, a drama, a crisis that made no logical sense. She'd accuse me of things I hadn't done, create problems that didn't exist, interpret neutral events as betrayals, and here's the sick part. When I'd try to address these patterns rationally, she'd flip it. I was invalidating her feelings. I was too logical. I was emotionally unavailable. The very stability she claimed to want became evidence of my inadequacy. No matter what approach I tried, nothing worked. When I was warm and affectionate, she felt suffocated. When I gave her space, she felt abandoned. When I was consistent, she was bored. When I was unpredictable, she was anxious. It was like trying to hit a target that moved every time you aimed, because that's exactly what it was, a moving target designed never to be hit. The relationship ended exactly how all relationships with avoidant women end, in exhaustion. Not explosive drama, just the slow realization that you're playing a game with no winning moves, that you're pouring love into a bucket with no bottom, that you're trying to fill a void in someone who's terrified of being full. Here's something crucial to understand. The avoidant woman often has both avoidant and anxious traits, a toxic combination psychologists call disorganized attachment. One moment she's terrified you'll leave, the next she's pushing you out the door. She simultaneously clings and rejects, needs and repels. This isn't just confusing for you, it's torture for her. She's at war with herself, and you're collateral damage in a battle she doesn't even understand she's fighting. This internal conflict manifests in bizarre ways. She'll block you everywhere, then reach out from a new number days later. She'll tell you she never wants to see you again, then show up at places she knows you'll be. She'll date someone new immediately after leaving you, then text you while lying next to them. These aren't calculated moves. They're the desperate actions of someone whose attachment system is completely scrambled. Here's what makes avoidant women particularly dangerous. They're often highly functional in every other area of life. They have successful careers, friends, hobbies. They seem independent, confident, self-sufficient. This makes you think the relationship problems are somehow your fault. If she's so capable everywhere else, you must be the problem, right? Wrong. Relationships trigger their attachment system in ways nothing else does. They can run a company, but can't handle genuine intimacy. They also pride themselves on not needing anyone, especially men. They view emotional dependence as weakness, vulnerability as danger. They look at women in healthy relationships with a mixture of pity and contempt. Pity because they see them as weak, contempt because they secretly envy their ability to trust. The avoidant woman has built her entire identity around not needing what she desperately wants. This creates a special kind of torture for the men who love them. You're not just fighting against behavior patterns, you're fighting against their entire sense of self. Asking them to be vulnerable, to trust, to depend on you even slightly, feels to them like you're asking them to cease existing. Their independence isn't just a trait, it's their survival mechanism. Now you might be thinking, okay, but surely with the right approach, with patience and understanding, you can help them heal. Let me stop you right there. This is the fantasy that destroys good men, the belief that your love can fix someone who's terrified of love itself, that your consistency can overcome their chaos, that your patience can outlast their pathology. Here's the brutal truth. You cannot love someone out of an avoidant attachment style. This isn't low self-esteem you can compliment away. This isn't trust issues you can prove yourself through. This is fundamental neurological wiring created in early childhood, reinforced through years of experience. Changing it requires intensive therapy, deep self-awareness, and most importantly, their own desire to change. And most avoidant women don't want to change because their avoidance feels like strength to them. I once made the mistake of thinking I could be different, that if I just found the right combination of distance and closeness, warmth and independence, I could create a safe space for an avoidant woman to finally let her guard down. I studied attachment theory, read every book, tried every approach. You know what I learned? You can't outsmart someone's psychological defenses. The harder you try, the more you trigger their alarm system. And even if you master this dance, even if you become the perfect emotional yo-yo partner, what have you won? A relationship where you can never fully relax, never fully trust, never fully love. Where you're constantly monitoring the emotional temperature, adjusting your behavior to avoid triggering their avoidance. Where you're not yourself, but a carefully calibrated version designed not to scare them away. That's not love, it's emotional prison. Let me tell you about the darkest tactic avoidant women use, usually unconsciously. They keep backup options, ex-boyfriends who still carry torches, male friends who would drop everything for a chance, orbiters who've been waiting in the wings for years. When you refuse to play their push-pull games, when you maintain your boundaries, they'll invoke these alternatives. Maybe I should go back to my ex who actually understood me. My friend never made me feel this way. They're not necessarily lying, these options exist, but they're weapons deployed to make you fall in line. The message is clear. Play by my dysfunctional rules, or I'll replace you with someone who will. And many men, terrified of losing her, fold. They abandon their boundaries, suppress their needs, contort themselves into whatever shape seems least threatening. They become exactly the kind of man the avoidant woman will eventually despise. Weak, needy, without backbone. It's a trap with no escape. Here's something that will twist your mind. Avoidant women often end relationships at the peak of emotional intimacy. Just when everything is perfect, when you're both happy, when it seems like you've finally broken through, that's when they run. Not because something's wrong, but because everything's right. The intimacy has exceeded their tolerance level, and their attachment system is screaming danger. I've seen men destroyed by this. They replay those final perfect moments over and over, trying to understand what went wrong. They didn't do anything wrong. Being perfect was what was wrong. Creating genuine intimacy was the trigger. Success was the failure. How do you process that? How do you move forward when doing everything right led to losing everything? The aftermath of loving an avoidant woman is unique in its devastation. It's not just heartbreak, it's psychological chaos. You question everything. Your judgment, your perception of reality, your understanding of love itself. You've been through so many cycles of push and pull that your emotional compass is completely scrambled. You don't trust your own feelings anymore because they've been invalidated so many times. Many men develop their own attachment issues after these relationships. They become anxious, constantly seeking reassurance in future relationships. Or they become avoidant themselves, terrified of vulnerability because they've learned it leads to pain. The avoidant woman doesn't just break your heart, she breaks your ability to love normally. I've consulted with hundreds of men over the years, and the stories are eerily similar. She was perfect, then she vanished. Everything was great, then she created a fight out of nothing. She said she loved me, then acted like I didn't exist. The patterns are so consistent that I could predict their relationship's future after hearing just the first few weeks. And in all those cases, across all those years, I've never seen a single happy ending with an avoidant woman. Not one. So how do you make an avoidant woman attached? Here's the honest answer: you don't. You can't make anyone attached who's fundamentally terrified of attachment. You can't love someone into emotional availability. You can't be patient enough, understanding enough, perfect enough to overcome decades of psychological programming. What you can do is recognize the signs early and make a conscious choice. Either accept that you're entering a relationship that will be defined by distance, drama, and dysfunction, or walk away before you're too invested to leave. There's no third option where you transform them through the power of your love. That's Hollywood fantasy, not psychological reality. The signs are there from the beginning if you know what to look for. The push-pull dynamic starts early, usually within the first few weeks. They'll be intensely interested, then suddenly distant. They'll share deep vulnerabilities, then act like it never happened. They'll create problems where none exist, start fights about nothing, interpret your actions in the worst possible light. Watch how they talk about past relationships. Every ex is either a narcissist they escaped from or a weakling they lost respect for. There's no middle ground, no relationships that just didn't work out. Everyone either abandoned them or suffocated them. They're always the victim or the hero, never just a participant in a relationship that failed. Pay attention to their relationship with vulnerability. Do they mock people who express emotions? Do they pride themselves on not needing anyone? Do they see independence as a virtue and interdependence as weakness? These aren't just personality quirks. They're warning signs of someone who's fundamentally unavailable for genuine intimacy. Notice how they handle conflict. Do they storm out instead of talking things through? Do they shut down emotionally when you try to address issues? Do they deflect, blame, project rather than taking any responsibility? Conflict resolution requires vulnerability, and avoidant women would rather burn the relationship down than be vulnerable. If you're currently with an avoidant woman, you have a choice to make. You can continue the cycle, hoping that this time will be different, that your love will be enough, that she'll finally see your worth and settle into stable intimacy. But hope isn't a strategy, and love isn't enough when someone is terrified of being loved. Or you can accept the hard truth. Some people aren't available for the kind of relationship you want. Not because they're bad people, but because their psychological wiring makes genuine intimacy feel like existential threat. You can have compassion for their struggle without sacrificing yourself to it. The most loving thing you can do for both of you might be to leave, to stop enabling their dysfunction by participating in it, to stop teaching them that relationships are supposed to be endless cycles of pursuit and retreat, to demonstrate that healthy people don't tolerate being treated like an emotional yo-yo. I know this isn't what you want to hear. You want the secret formula, the magic words, the perfect approach that will finally make her feel safe enough to love you fully. But that formula doesn't exist. You're trying to solve a problem that isn't yours to solve. You're trying to heal wounds you didn't create with love they can't receive. The real question isn't how to make an avoidant woman attached. It's why you're attracted to someone who's fundamentally unavailable. What is it about the challenge, the drama, the push-pull dynamic that feels familiar to you? What wounds in your own attachment system make this dysfunction feel like love? Because here's the thing. Healthy people don't stay in relationships with avoidant partners. They recognize the dysfunction early and leave. They don't try to fix, save, or change someone who's showing them clearly that they're not available for genuine intimacy. They value themselves too much to accept crumbs of affection between periods of emotional starvation. The most loving thing you can do for both of you might be to leave, to stop enabling their dysfunction by participating in it, to stop teaching them that relationships are supposed to be endless cycles of pursuit and retreat, to demonstrate that healthy people don't tolerate being treated like an emotional yo-yo. I know this isn't what you want to hear. You want the secret formula, the magic words, the perfect approach that will finally make her feel safe enough to love you fully. But that formula doesn't exist. You're trying to solve a problem that isn't yours to solve. You're trying to heal wounds you didn't create with love they can't receive. The real question isn't how to make an avoidant woman attached. It's why you're attracted to someone who's fundamentally unavailable. What is it about the challenge, the drama, the push-pull dynamic that feels familiar to you? What wounds in your own attachment system make this dysfunction feel like love? Because here's the thing. Healthy people don't stay in relationships with avoidant partners. They recognize the dysfunction early and leave. They don't try to fix, save, or change someone who's showing them clearly that they're not available for genuine intimacy. They value themselves too much to accept crumbs of affection between periods of emotional starvation. The truth is, you already know the answer. You've probably known it for a while. The question isn't whether you should stay or go. It's whether you have the courage to act on what you already know. Whether you value yourself enough to choose available love over unavailable drama. Whether you're ready to stop confusing intensity with intimacy, challenge with connection, suffering with love. Remember this. Every moment you spend trying to decode an avoidant woman's behavior is a moment you could spend with someone who doesn't require decoding. Every ounce of energy you put into managing her emotional dysregulation is energy you could invest in building something real with someone stable. Every tear you shed over her push-pull games is a tear wasted on someone who can't fully receive your love. The avoidant woman will always be a dangerous enigma, a psychological puzzle that seems solvable but isn't. You can spend years trying to crack the code, perfectly approach, find the key to her heart. Or you can recognize that some doors are locked from the inside and no amount of knocking will open them. The choice, as always, is yours, but choose wisely. Your emotional future depends on it.